How important is it for the Nuggets to get off to a fast start this season with the schedule that's in front of them? What can it mean if they don't or if they do? Can Denver rest this season with where the roster's at? Plus, we'll talk about what teams might sneak up from behind and catch Denver. We'll talk about all that and more on today's Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us and being in every day or hanging out with us Monday through Friday as we get you set for the week before the Nuggets start their season. All that and more on today's show. We're going to talk about why Denver needs to get off to a fast start. We're going to talk about if Denver can actually rest this season, which was such a big conversation after how last season ended. And we're going to talk about what teams might sneak up and bite Denver in the backside. What teams can sneak up from behind and actually catch Denver this season. All that and more on today's show. Do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt Moore. I'm joined by Ryan Blackburn of Mile High Sports here with you on a Wednesday. It's Tuesday night. We're doing the live show. You can join us by going to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets and hitting that like, subscribe, turn on notifications. We got folks like Snow Wolf's hanging out with us, Joe Broussard, Hurricane's always hanging out with us. Grace is in this one. I'm going to be on Grace's show next Wednesday, so you can check that out on her YouTube page. Daniel Barry's in here, Taylor Klein, lots of folks hanging out with us here on Wednesday. Glad to have you with us here on the Wednesday podcast, Tuesday night live show. All right, Ryan, let's get to it. So you kind of suggested this one for a topic, and I do think it's a relevant one. Why Denver must start fast. Do you know what my least favorite question in NBA pre-game pressers or practice pressers is?
So are you guys going to take more threes this year?
No, it's not that one. It's how important is it for you? It's always a TV reporter. God bless him. God bless him.
Got to do it.
How important is it for you to get off to a fast start? And the reason it bothers me is literally no coach, player, executive, trainer, fan, analytics person, anyone, sports psychologist, no one is ever like, you know what we want to do is we really want to start down 15, right? Like no one is ever like, I really want to be down at the end of the first quarter. We want to get off to as slow a start as possible and then catch up on them. Like no one wants that. And so it's crazy. And so when we ask like why Denver must start fast, it's like, well, because starting slow is very, very bad. But when we look at the schedule, Ryan, in particular, how about my wife's been like hammering this. She's just like, she can't believe when she looks at the schedule. Thursday, October 24th, they play the Oklahoma City Thunder, expected to be the number one team in the Western Conference.
Yep.
Wednesday, November 6th, 2 weeks later, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like they play the Thunder twice in that stretch.
By the way, the next two Oklahoma City Thunder games, I don't know if you clocked this, March 9th and March 10th back-to-back in Oklahoma City.
Yep.
What was the league thinking with that one, man?
I mean, Denver, I guess they always get them.
It's an hour and a half flight.
Yeah, I get it. They play the Grizzlies twice in these first 20 games. They play the Cavaliers, Warriors. Clippers are not going to be great this year, but it's always a big game. The Knicks, expected to be very good. The Mavericks twice. So you got Thunder twice, Grizzlies twice, and Mavericks twice in the first 20 games.
When people say that you need to start fast, it's not necessarily what they like. It's not always what they mean. What you want to make sure is you don't start behind the 8 ball, right? You want to make sure you don't get out to that start where you're always playing catch up for the entire rest of the season, where you get guys going down and you don't have the ability to rest them because they have to catch up in the standings. Like this is the exact reason why starting fast is very important for all teams is because it provides you flexibility. Not every team gets the luxury to do it, of course, but the Nuggets, especially this year, it's going to be fascinating to see whether they can. And I'll be looking forward to seeing what their record is after 20 games.
So I think that the Nuggets are no longer in like, oh yeah, it's going to be great. Like everything's just going to be odd. Like, 2 years ago, it was that, like, if you've been like, what's the chances of them having a disaster start? I was like, pretty low. And I think they lost like 2 of their first 3. They lost that Utah game.
But even then, like you just pointed out to like, oh yeah, they weren't quite ready. Like, do we expect them to get ready? Sure.
Last year they started off hot, so there wasn't any sort of concern. They really got off to a great start. And so it wasn't, and even going into the season, it wasn't like, because they were defending champs and expected to repeat. So there was no real concern there. It was like, yeah, if things go sideways, that'd be bad, but they're the champs, they'll get it right.
Yeah.
This one's a little different.
Yeah.
If they start 2-10, God forbid, like stuff's going to get real tense real quick. It's going to be bad.
It's going to be pretty ugly. Like that's where you start to see major changes being made. That's where you start seeing lineup changes being made even more than like you would possibly expect. It's where the panic trades happen. Those are the ones where like, hey, it's all fun and games to start developing kids until you go 2-10, or if it's 4-8, or even if it's like 5-7, and you start realizing, hey, Michael Malone throws a hissy fit in a press conference and says, I need more veterans on this team. That will happen.
Yeah,
it just will.
If he says, like, imagine that like there's a game where it's like last year and the bench gets annihilated, right? And or a starter's out, and Malone, and like the way Malone would say it is like, and I don't blame insert young player here, right? Like I don't blame them. They're being asked a lot. This is not on them.
They're just young.
But could we use some more veterans? Sure.
Yeah.
But we're gonna do the best. He'll do that. But we're gonna do we've got to get him ready. That's on me. While also making explicitly clear who it is on.
Yeah.
And so like that could get really ugly. Now, on the other side of this is, look, if they jump out fast, because I've talked a lot about this on previous shows, they don't have it's really weird how I keep learning things about the season, because when you ask like, what's a hard schedule? Most people are going to say, oh, it's do you play good teams? And another one would be like, oh, how many back-to-backs do you have, right? Are you on bad rest? The problem last year was that the league gave them a ton of games in a very condensed time. And the reason I know that is because Michael Malone said it 1,800 times in the first couple of weeks, because that's how they were feeling. And like the players admitted it. Like the players were like, yeah, like
very excited to go rest a little bit. Very excited to take these next 2 days off. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And it's the opposite this year, where I think they're tied for the second fewest games before Thanksgiving. So they have this stretch where they can kind of ease into it. And then if they can pick up wins, that's going to set them up for later in the season. But they do need to get a lead. You need, if the Nuggets are going to have the season that they want, if they're going to retake another top 3 seed or higher, if they're going to have the season that they want, you can't be working from behind. Not with this team. They've got to start pretty well versus some pretty good teams.
What's one quick question here before we go to a break? Record-wise, 10-10, 11-9. What's the lowest you could see them being before you start to hit the panic button?
9-11.
Yeah.
If they're 2 games under 500, it's like not a good start, but you can dig out of that, right? Yeah. But they're going to need to have an absolutely blistering stretch at some point. Right. But that's okay. If it's, honestly, like if it's 8-12 and you're 4 games under, it's going to be, there'll be tense in that building. So.
I completely agree. I think the number's 8-12 where you start to ask some real questions.
But hey, maybe they'll go 15-5 and everything will be great. Okay. Up next. So I really need to get to this question because it was such a big talking point. The starters need more rest. The roster's really thin. Are they going to be able to rest this season? We'll talk about that up next here on Locked On Nuggets.
Oh, I hit the wrong one again.
It's okay. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Glad to have you guys with us on this show. It's Halloween time. I put out a purple light in front of the house as a spooky kind of thing. We put a magnetic bats on the garage door. I wanted to get something really terrifying like a girl from The Ring, but my wife will not let me. What's something that scares you? Share a fear no matter how big or small. I work in a very unstable industry, and it's always really, really scary. Like, it's just very scary how where media is at in 2024. Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them. Sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Lots of folks with us in the chat over at youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets, including Joe, who references an absolutely incredible book. He says, Lamb, the Gospel According to Stiffs, as the chat is still trying to come up with a name. I think I might have it, but I'm going to run it by Ryan after the show. So we'll see if we got it taken care of.
I've also got a great idea from a comment from somebody else. It was very good.
Okay, we'll work it out. We're going to come up with a name. All right. So I talked a little bit about this when I broke down the schedule about a month ago on the show. And I talked about how, hey, like there's an opportunity here where if you get off to a fast start, if you can take advantage of not playing a lot of games early, from December through the All-Star break, they play a ton. They have a very heavy schedule in December and January. And the thing that I said, and I don't think they will do this, but I do think it's relevant, they need to rest guys in that stretch. So, like, you need to get off to a hot start so you can afford to be like, okay, we're taking one of these back-to-backs and we're going to sit guys. Monday, February 3rd, that's like a week from the All-Star break. They play 2 games versus the Pelicans at home. They're going to play them both in those games because it's a home game. But when you looked at further down the schedule at some of these other games, and especially in the month of January, there's so many games every other night. There's an opportunity. January 14th at Dallas. That one has seeding implications, but that's a really good spot to rest because you have Houston the next night at home. Like, focus on getting Houston. Don't give Dallas any more tape on you. That to me seems like a not bad spot to rest. But the question, Ryan, is like, you want to go into these games with an idea of, okay, Aaron's going to sit tonight, but we still can win this game. Jamal's going to sit tonight, but we can still win this game. With where the roster is at, what's your confidence level that Yoke's an entirely different thing? If you're resting Yoke, you're giving up on the game. But with the other guys, what is your feeling on if they're going to have enough to get wins? What's the quality of opponent? Are they going to be able to rest guys in the starting unit at all this year?
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit on Pickaxe, that if they miss one player in a game that's in the top 9 of their current rotation, they can get by, right? They can get by. It just depends on who the guy is. You have to figure out one direction or the other. Like, okay, is it Aaron Gordon? All right, then you're probably sitting him. You're going Peyton Watson in the starting lineup. You're going Hunter Tyson in his place off the bench or something like that. And then you can probably survive at least to the point where those minutes aren't horrible. The real question is when multiple guys go down. And if you're asking, okay, can you really rest guys while there's multiple injuries happening? And then you start to play the game where, all right, now Jalen Pickett's coming into the rotation, or Zeke Naji's coming into the rotation, or Vlatko is now a full mainstay as opposed to sort of an advantage piece. And a lot of these teams, especially in that December and January time where you're talking about it being very consolidated, they're going to try to take advantage of that. And Denver, you got to figure out how to play more players in that situation rather than fewer. Because if you don't, then you're going to run into all of the issues that they faced last year, where guys are gassing out. You have multiple games in a row where guys are playing 35 plus minutes, especially Jokic. That is a very real fear. So are they going to be able to? I have no idea, but it's why starting strong is very, very important.
Yeah, you wanted the optionality, right? Like you wanted it to be like, hey, you have a 4-game lead. And I mean, this is what they did when they won the title is they had such a big lead on the number 1 seed that they were able to be like, yeah, we can pull back on this one. This one's fine.
The problem though that you run into, of course, is that that's the number 1 seed. And it's a little bit different when you're evaluating versus the rest of the playoff picture and like trying to get into the top 6. Like what is acceptable for the Nuggets this year is also just another important thing there. Like, are they going to be fine with being not a top 3 defense like Michael Malone is putting out there on media day? Are they going to be fine with not being a top 4 seed? Because if it comes down to it and you're resting games against Dallas, that's going to be really impactful in that conversation. So I'd be worried about the overall mentality of not just Michael Malone, but of the players in the locker room as well, who were very much against rest down the stretch. And that was one of the big storylines too.
Yeah, I mean that was like such a thing last year where it was like, why are these players playing so much? The answer is because they make $50 million and they wanted to.
They wanted that.
Yeah, that's what they wanted. And like, look, a lot of it with Yoke too is Yoke will play almost always, and I don't know if he'll ever get to a point where he's like, yeah, I'm gonna probably rest a little bit. Maybe like way later in his career, but like it's a pride thing. And like Adam's done a really good job of talking about this with the Serbian stuff too, with the cultural identification and kind of that. And I think it's hard if it's like, if you're Aaron Gordon and you're like, if he's going, I'm going. And I get that, but I'm also like, Aaron, that's your upper body gets injured.
It's also horrible because like Denver can survive games without Jokic. They can't survive games without Jokic and Aaron Gordon. So like you should try to stagger those guys' rest times. Yep. Try to stagger everybody's rest time within the top 4, because then you can survive a game versus the Houston Rockets or the Orlando Magic or somebody of that nature where they're good teams. But like any given time you can win in those situations.
Grace asked 2 good questions. Yeah, don't you want tape on Dallas? And how much does the tape advantage really matter? It matters a little in that what you will see is like very small details of like, oh, like they got really jammed up trying to run this set because of this guy was on the floor.
Yeah.
Or, oh, they always want to do this in this situation. Like those little tiny things I think are actually like, those can be really big edges depending on what happens and not showing them exactly. I think honestly, a little bit it's the timing too. You want to try and avoid them getting used to the timing of your actions, because by the end of the series, that's why game 6 and 7 are always a slog. Yeah. Is you're so used to the timing of the execution.
In those situations, also you learn a little bit about what the other team wants to do as well, and where they feel your pressure points are, because they can't help themselves in those situations. Yeah. Now, Luka is a little bit of a different beast because sometimes he goes after the strongest dog, and that's what he's done over the course of his career. But most teams will naturally try to pick apart your weaknesses, and then you know what to look for in a playoffs.
Yeah. One more thing before we get out of here is on this segment is I did want to kind of note, as always, the important games that here is how, like, I've done the research. This is how you win 50 games. You win your home games, which they were good, not great at last year. You win games versus teams under 500, which they were very good at, and they've been good at the last couple of years. And you win your division games, which really hurt them last year.
Yeah.
Like the Shea Gilgeous-Alexander game winner wound up being pretty important for seeding. Like everyone wants to point to San Antonio, but it's not just the games at the end. It's the games in the beginning too. You need to beat Utah 4 times. You need to beat Utah 4 times, Portland 4 times. You need to split with Wolves and OKC.
Yeah.
Like that's got to be it. And that gets you to 12-4. And that's probably good enough.
Yeah.
Right. If you take care of business versus the bad teams. And this is why the rest thing is tough, because like you really do have to find spots where, and I will say, for me, they never want to do this because it's a business thing. And they're like, you don't want to disappoint your home crowd, which will hurt ticket sales. If you want to win a championship, which will help ticket sales, you need to rest a little bit. If the opponent is really good on the front end or back end of a back-to-back and you're home, you should be able to rest that one. Find a couple spots for these guys. Okay. On the other side, we're going to talk about what teams might sneak up. We've talked about OKC and Minnesota and Dallas and all these teams at the top. But what about the rest of the Western Conference? What are some teams that might sneak up and surprise Denver and maybe sneak past them in the standings? Who does Denver have to watch out for? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. God help me, I'm betting the Broncos this week. This line is dumb. The Chargers are road favorites in this spot by multiple points.
Yeah.
And I bet against the Broncos last week because I was like, Bo Nix had negative yards at the half. This is not good. The defense is really good. I have the Broncos power rated as like a minus 0.5. The market thinks they're like minus 2.5. And they think the Chargers are a little better. And I just don't agree. And so you have a predictable offense in the Chargers with a defense that's looking pretty good. And then Nix has moments. So God help me, I'm betting the Broncos this weekend. You can do that on FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Wednesday. If you're on the podcast, give us a 5-star review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button for us. All right, Ryan. So there's all these like big threats in the West, right? Like the Wolves, who I don't know if you know this, but they beat Denver last year, and OKC that won the season series, and they're like the new hot team, understandably for a lot of reasons. Dallas made the finals. Those are kind of like the big three, I think, and when people talk about teams in the West. But what are some teams you think that are a little bit surprising that the Nuggets might be battling with, at least for part of the season?
Yeah, so obviously you put them into a different category. Minnesota, OKC, and Dallas from last year. Like that, I think, is the cream of the crop, and you can throw Denver in there as well. I think that Phoenix is the first team that comes to mind for this particular exercise. They are surprisingly better than where they were after they lost to Minnesota last year. Probably should have been a strong indicator to people that Minnesota was pretty legit when they just absolutely waxed Phoenix. And Phoenix learned from that a little bit, and I think they got better. They drafted Ryan Dunn. They drafted Oso Ighodaro. Both of those young guys, I think, are going to help them. And the addition of Tyus Jones for free is pretty wild. It is a pretty wild addition for them to be able to get. And it does kind of make the rich richer in some ways, where they don't necessarily need a whole bunch of ball handling and creation, but they've got another guy. And so you definitely need that for rest purposes for a team like the Suns that has some older guys that are a little bit injury prone, like Bradley Beal. So I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to compete for 50 wins, and that will put them right near where Denver is in a first-round series.
I think Phoenix's upsides can put them like high in that category. So one of the things that I've kind of noticed, I've been doing some research, as I'm wont to do.
You do that.
I do that quite a bit, too much. And so one of the things I looked at was, this kind of caught me surprised. I kept noticing that a lot of really bad teams by SRS were in the league last year. So I actually kind of looked this up. Of the bottom 200 teams since the merger, since 1980, okay, the worst teams by SRS, which is how many points did you score versus how good your strength of schedule was. So it's a better indicator of how good you were. So the 200 worst teams last year was tied for was second most behind two teams that were tied for first, or seasons, was 7. Like 7 teams were in that top 200. Of all of those teams, 30 teams since the merger, the last year had 7. What you're actually kind of seeing is in both conferences, the play-in keeps teams consistent, and then the real bottom is awful because of the lottery odds. Awful.
Yeah.
And what that's doing is kind of actually boosting up some of these win totals to where that's why when everyone's like, oh, the West is so tough, the West is such a gauntlet. And I'm like, yeah, but OKC won 57 games last year. Denver won 57 and Minnesota won 56. That's 3 teams of 55 plus, right? I think you can do that if you take care of business, if you have the right win profile, you can do that. What's interesting here, I think, is kind of asking about like Phoenix. I think their ceiling is like 55 plus wins. Like they could do that. That's like not a problem. Mike Budenholzer cranks those out every now and again. The bench is better. Taylor mentions this. Monte and Plumlee were solid pickups for sure, and I agree. I think their pod is, or their sorry, not their pod. Their depth is a lot better. But I'll go even further and say, I think there are some teams here like the Kings who might be surprisingly really good. The Pelicans are just very tough for me because it's like they still need a trade and they haven't done it and they don't have a center. But like I like the idea of what they are. Yeah. I like DeJounte Murray, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, and Zion Williams. And with like, if you could just find a fifth starter, it's pretty good. And then there's Houston, who is going to play more young guys, but Houston might be really good. And they've actually they won the season series versus Denver. This is why I'm always talking about the tiebreaker stuff is like that. If one of these teams gets within range of Denver and they have tiebreaker, that could be the difference in fourth or fifth or fifth or sixth or third and fourth. Right. And those are very big differences.
Right.
The key here, though, I think is if Denver was a little bit better, that's why I do kind of like, I've gone back and forth of, it's a shame that they got worse and didn't find a way to really make a step forward, because I don't think this Western Conference is this dread gauntlet anymore. The Wolves are worse with Randall than Cat. We can all like, even if it has some upside and Cat had problems, they're worse. The Clippers are way worse.
Yeah.
Way worse. They might be okay, but they're still way worse. Dallas should be better. We'll see if they are. Phoenix should be better. We'll see if they are. The Pelicans, we don't know. And like, there's just like a chance here that Pelicans, Lakers, Warriors all slide. And then you could have really had some distance, but because Denver lost a starter and because of what the roster looks like, I'm forced to kind of be like, I don't know that their floor is high enough to feel like they're invulnerable to getting caught by some of these teams.
You didn't mention your team, Memphis.
Yeah, they're another one.
They're another one that, like, I'm not sure where to put them yet, because the rumors out of camp and out of like preseason for them are that Zach Edey is this absolute monster who is going to surprise a ton of people with how good he is out of the gate. And if you can get him to effectively match what Steven Adams was doing for them, then you've suddenly got the makings of what was previously a 2 seed in the Western Conference and a 3 seed before that. So I think that they are still a very good matchup. And that could also be one that you're looking at this. And I think you're right that the West, the top level of the West isn't like this unmatched gauntlet. But I do think that from a night-to-night basis, as long as you're not playing a team that is out of the play-in race, you still have to work for every win. And you just don't have to do that in the Eastern Conference. And that's why, like, some of these win totals in previous years, especially, were pretty low. We're a lot lower, especially in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, look, Wizards and Nets both, I think, are at 20 right now.
Detroit can't be much higher.
They actually are. They're
24.
Yeah, they're up there. Like,
oh wow.
Actually, no, that's the thing though, is like there's actually like a really big difference between 25 and 20. Like if you're sub 20, you're bad. Yeah. If you're like 25 to 30, it's like, yeah, you're bad, but like you're heading somewhere. You have NBA talent. I love Detroit's over this year. I think they're gonna be good. Not good.
I put Phoenix in the same category as Dallas in terms of, I would pick Denver to win that, but I could see the other thing going. I could see the other thing happening.
Yeah, and like so much of this is also, there's regular season. Can you get past Denver versus can you beat them in a playoff series?
Yeah.
Like you want to talk about like my level of confidence in Denver once the playoffs start causes a lot more of like, there's ways that this could end in disaster, right? Because it's like you lost to the Wolves in game 7. Yeah, you were up 20 and that's embarrassing. But you lost to a really great team in 7 games in which you had every opportunity to win that series. Yeah. Came back from an 0-2 hole at home. That's very different from, the Rockets upset them in 6 games.
Yeah.
Or the Kings beat
Or
Denver.
the Lakers.
Like, if the Kings beat Michael Malone,
there will be held up. I mean, they might fire him on the spot. Like, and that would be brutal.
If the Kings get him fired twice, good God.
Jesus.
So that's kind of like that, like how to equate it. I do want to ask you, because I don't know if you did this with Swiper or not. Do you have a projection for where you have Denver in the West?
In terms of seeding, no, I haven't done the full seedings yet. I would guess that it is still third because I just don't believe in Dallas in the regular season yet. I think that they're still going to have to figure some things out from a defensive standpoint with that starting group. I would put Denver at 52 to 53 wins in that general range, and that probably puts them in that 2-3 range because I think Minnesota regresses just a touch as well.
Okay, so this is kind of funny. There's been a lot about like me not having them as a 50-win team, etc. And I made some adjustments to the model, and I like it a lot. It looks a lot better. I think it's going to do a lot better this year.
Yeah.
And but the difference is I have 2. I have one that's like their objective, game neutral. Like, this is how good you are.
Okay.
And then there's the one which is it sims the schedule and goes, what's your win probability in all these games? What's the average win probability at home versus away based off of home court advantage? And then kind of goes from there.
Cool.
Yeah, on neutral observation, I have them at 52 wins, which that sounds right. And then, like, to your point, you factor in the opponents that they face, and that's where it gets a lot tougher. And then they wind up just south of 50. Now, I still think they're going to win probably 51, 52 games. I still just think that that's like the most likely outcome, because I do think that Joker almost provides an instant Joker with a non-missing 2 starters roster. Pretty much locks in top like 50 plus.
Yeah.
Like, you can have quibbles and problems with the starters with Jamal and his availability and like this, that, and the other. But like, as long as it's NBA championship caliber starting players, which this is, probably going to win 50 as long as he's healthy, knock on wood.
There was a game at the end of right before the All-Star break in 2023 where Vlatko Čančar was in the starting lineup against Miami. And they just killed them. It wasn't even close. It was never in question that they were going to win that game with Vlatko in the starting lineup. And it's just that kind of seal or that kind of floor that Jokic gives you as a team where he can make that functional. He can make that work. You don't have to give it like 27 games in order to do it. Like, in 4 or 5 games, Jokic can get you 3-1, 3-2 based off of whatever you've got going for you. So I agree with you. The floor is probably 50 unless something catastrophic happens. And it can. Like, nobody's saying that it can't, but I think that Denver's still going to be in that range where they're a top 4 seed in the West. And maybe that changes. Maybe there's a team that surprises, but we're just going to have to wait and see.
We'll have final projections for you probably on the eve of the season on the Monday show before the season starts. All right, that's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. You can catch Ryan at NBA Blackburn on Twitter. Make sure to check out his work at Mile High Sports and support the guy. You want to make sure that you support our guys here on Locked On Nuggets. Swipe will be with you tomorrow. I think he's going to do it with Ryan.
Not tomorrow. I think it's Thursday. Or I guess, yeah.
Yeah, Thursday, and then Swipe and Gripe on Friday. We'll have that for you at 2:00 Mountain Time on Friday, 2:00 p.m. Mountain Time, is Swipe and Gripe on Friday. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll see you guys again next time here on. Oh, before I go, Nate Landeskog likes Locked On Avalanche. If it's good enough for Landeskog, it's good enough for you. Go check out Locked On Avalanche.
Heck yeah! What an endorsement.
All right, have a good night. We'll see you guys next time on Locked On Nuggets.